Growing up in a super rigorous religious household can be a wacky experience, to say the least. Luckily enough for me, I got to get out of it before I had to experience something like this. Now look, before we get started here, if you're religious, that's fine with me. I just think that there's some super interesting points that can be taken from such a simple video. But okay, the idea of abstinence in religious Christian communities is very prevalent if you didn't already know. But once you get married, you're good to go in God's eyes. Hence this super awkward video. You can feel the nervousness emanating from the couple here. But in all fairness, I do give them credit because I haven't seen much content made about this point, this experience that so many people have to go through. I've never really seen anyone comment on these archaic practices. That's the thing though, you sort of get this feeling that the reason for marriage in this context has one main reason. You can now do the deed. I mean, look how many children these people tend to have. They can't control themselves. It makes you wonder how many people get married for this very reason, or get married because they aren't condemned because someone got pregnant. Evangelicals, fundamentalists, whatever you want to call them, are pro-life, like guaranteed, and so they're not gonna have an abortion, and so largely their solution is to get married when someone gets pregnant. Once again, hence the more prevalent younger marriages, at least in the USA. Another more fundamental point is that these Christian circles, mainly Protestant fundamentalists like I mentioned, want control over your life. The more control they have, the longer you'll stay, the more people you'll invite, and most importantly, the more money they'll get. These places are experts at business schemes from top to bottom. I mean, just look at the byproduct of it all, this couple here. They are a pure representation of the church grabbing a hold of them. They're forced to abandon all autonomy that anyone outside of these legalistic circles takes for granted. After all, what's on the line if this couple doesn't maintain celibacy? Eternal suffering in the lake of fire. I don't think I need to do any extravagant convincing that what allows Christianity to run like Fortune 500 companies is indeed the control they have over their fellowship, seeing as you either believe this already or you won't ever believe it at all. So with that being said, I want to ensure that I'm not being too partisan, if that makes sense. You know, if you couldn't already tell, I don't go to church and I'm not a Christian. But with that being said, it is quite obvious that churches give a great sense of community to the people that go there. Further, going to church and just sort of practicing the religion can have an overall positive effect on your mental health. I don't think that it takes an expert to gather that this is one of the main reasons why generally Abrahamic religions have lasted for so long, and why millions of people still go to them in 2023, and they won't ever go away, at least effectively. Anyways, sort of what I was touching on earlier, what makes me worried for these people in these circles and critical of the establishment of the church or Christendom is that it can act in a severely predatory way. Really, this is shown by the initial clip, the abstinence of the couple, the control of the church. It's a result of everything discussed so far, and what's important to keep in mind is that there's no theological nuance, meaning you can't really debate anything because it's divine command. There's nothing that you can to supplant it. Not to mention the classic trope of Catholic priests, but we don't really need to get into the weeds on that. Once people are in the church, there's a sort of Stockholm Syndrome, if you will. Some practitioners find a way to rationalize their captivity, if you will. If I could be anecdotal, I've experienced and have heard stories of plenty of churchgoers not knowing anything outside of their family, work, and their church. They don't know what to do outside of any of these things. You could object and say, let them live how they want to live, and largely I would agree. It's just that I don't think that many of these come from a result of free will. Here, we now have to discuss my boy, Soren Kierkegaard. Kierkegaard doesn't really get too much attention, in a general sense these days, but he's extremely relevant for this video. The 18th century Danish philosopher was extremely critical of sort of highly organized, structured church, or Christendom, like I said earlier, even all those hundreds of years ago when it was a pretty brave thing to do, if you ask me. Further, he spoke out against the going through the motions of Christendom, the feeling that so many modern alienated Christians feel today. This is the reason why I stopped going to church, and the reason I would likely expect for many people that leave en masse. Kierkegaard was still a Christian, however, but he was an existentialist too, something you might not expect to go together unless you're an insufferable person like me who has to try and learn everything about everything. What's more is he's commonly regarded as the father of existentialism, writing things like, "Doubt is conquered by faith, just as it is faith which has brought doubt into the world." Further, to most likely surprise American evangelicals at the least, Kierkegaard wrote extensively about the subjectivity of things and the importance of the self, much like that of an atheist existentialist. What's even crazier coming from a Christian is he recognized that there's truly no objective way to find the Christian God. Imagine a Christian pastor saying that today. For Kierkegaard, all of this boils down to his idea of a leap of faith. Perhaps he would have thought differently today in a less Christian situation, but nonetheless, he thought that a leap of faith was necessary in a very individualistic and simple religious pursuit. If there's no way of objectively finding God, then how could the leap of faith in God really go wrong at all? You're either gonna get rewarded or you're not. And I'm not prescribing this here, but it is definitely a cool idea. This is at the very least an optimistic version of existentialism. The school of thought is often thought of as dark, even though it's really not. I think Kierkegaard's leap of faith is beautiful. More importantly, it's a lot far and away better than what American evangelicalism teaches, and really forces its believers to do, say, and think whatever American evangelicalism, that's a mouthful, teaches, as evidenced by this. Listen to that.